Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 11 of the Ascendancy podcast. My name is Chris,
Austin here.
And I'm Ben.
and thank you guys for joining us. I'm really excited for this episode. As you can see, we have our second guest of the Ascendancy podcast, Ben Mazaya here. Found him on social media a little while ago, and he's an amazing activist that I really respect and appreciate his hard work, and we're excited to have him on. So, Ben, take it away. Talk to us about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and always love being able to voice the message on different platforms and different audiences. I've been vegan for 6 years now, almost. Been an activist ever since I went vegan. I've always kind of had this activism blood in my life. Always fighting for what I believe in, kind of like the black sheep. And always been fighting for freedom. And essentially, it was something along the lines of that made the that helped me make the connection with veganism when I was listening to a speech, and the speech was kind of like talking about animals, or it wasn't talking about animals; it was talking about slaves. He was talking about animals, but he didn't really make it clear that he was talking about animals. And drew kind of the parallels between the injustices of human slavery and animal slavery. And at the end of the speech, he said, like, you guys probably all thought I was talking about humans, but in actuality, these are all what farmers say and do, and it really kind of hit me like, wow, like here I am, like advocating for human rights and for freedom and all fighting for autonomy and everything, and I'm the reason that like all these other individuals are being enslaved and oppressed. And I was like, you know after that realization, like there was no like I need to consider this, I need to consider going vegan. It was like I'm vegan now, like I don't know what I'm gonna do next, like what am I gonna eat, how am I gonna survive, how am I gonna live. So making that connection was crucial for me, and I figured out how to eat, and I figured out what to wear, and the rest was, I don't want to say it was hard because I had the motivation, right? It may have been, kind of tricky to like, you know, do some research and going to the grocery store, and there were maybe a couple of times I bought a product just not realizing that, okay, this is actually not a vegan product, right? Things like toilet paper and other random things that we can buy alternatives for that are just like, so like what, like I had to actually be checking that, so yeah. And then after I became vegan, kind of like everybody else, I felt like, man, like I need to tell everybody this, right? Like this is just shocking. And then, you know, started telling people only to discover that nobody really cared, right? And then kind of had to navigate the landscape of trying to figure out how to be an activist, how to actually get people to want to make this connection or lead them to this connection and get them to change. Because I know that it's not like an alignment thing. Like they actually do have these beliefs, but it is more of like a dissonance or a resistance, or you know. So as of the last like 4 or 5 years, as a street activist, I've learned a lot and kind of like learned how to be an activist, and how to be an effective activist. And that's my role now is, I'm a street activist. I'm an activist wherever I go. But I want to help educate activists to be the best activists they can be, the most effective activists they can be, and, help bring about that vegan world.
Excellent.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that's really powerful, and I appreciate you sharing with us your story. And before the podcast started, we were talking about how you've kind of talked about it so many times, but I think it's important for activists to share their development and how they became vegan, how this all came about, because it's important for people to realize that we're normal people just
Yeah.
like everyone else, and
Yeah.
we come to this conclusion in different ways, but ultimately we're not like random weirdos or hippies. We're just everyday people. So, yeah,
Yeah. We can be hippies if we want to be, but it's
yeah,
not like a
for sure.
requirement by any means,
The
Yeah.
stereotype. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I
Yeah.
wanted to touch on is, I've been in the activism space. I've been vegan for a long time now, and you have really recently reshaped my perspective on a lot of things, viewing your content, reshaping my perspective on how to go about doing effective advocacy, and also how to maximize our utilization of technology, especially artificial intelligence, and doing outreach. So I discovered you a relatively short time ago, and you've had a really transformational impact on my perspective. So I really, I
Yeah.
greatly appreciate you. And leading into that, something, and a few other activists are really leading on this in conjunction with you, but this is something you've brought to my eyes, and that's how has your perspective of veganism evolved over time, and how has Leslie Cross specifically shaped your views?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the journey into activism is probably similar for a lot of people, right? They make this connection that, we shouldn't be, in some way using, abusing, exploiting, or doing all these cruel things or something. We just discover that what we grew up with was completely a lie, right? And so then, we start making different decisions, and we start, first thing usually we'll change is our diet and what we wear, and we won't really go in and study veganism. And then as we start becoming active, we'll start getting inspired by certain, influencers on the internet. And, we start mimicking their language because we think that this is, what all the biggest influencers are doing. So that means this might work, or this must work, or, and then we don't ask questions like, oh, like maybe this is just what works to get you a big following, or maybe this is just, what works because this is what people want to hear, or something like that, right? And so my journey in activism started with that. I was just, essentially copying what I was seeing other activists do, right? Um, I never questioned it. Like, I never thought I had to. Kind of like, all the industries that exploit animals. Like, I never questioned it because I didn't think I had to, right? And then I got to this point where, we're talking about abuse a lot, talking about treatment, not really understanding that we're opening the door for treatment-based conversations, right? And so, I actually burnt out, like during the pandemic. I became an organizer in AV, like after my first or second cube, because the organizers were kind of stepping away. And, and I kind of burnt out. Um, because of a lack of structure, because a lack of, really understanding what I was doing. And, the conversations just were really, really difficult. Um, and so when I took a step back, this is kind of when Leslie Cross came into the picture for me. And like as soon as I heard, it was like on TikTok, I think I heard somebody who was just like speaking some quotes from some of his documentation. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting. I need to go look this up. And I looked it up, and as soon as I read it, like my whole just life kind of shattered in front of my eyes. I'm like, this is the last puzzle pieces that I needed, last puzzle piece that I needed, right? It showed me why my conversations are going in the direction that they're going. It showed me why, right? Like, for example, like, when we all go vegan, we start just hearing all these things about animals, and we don't really know what's involved under the vegan scope and what's not, right? Like, I started hearing a lot of people talking about dog leashes. Like it's, not vegan to use this type of leash because it hurts the dog or something, or this type of leash. And, it's like, this actually has nothing to do with veganism, right? I mean, it's something that a compassionate person should care about. But as a vegan, I'm not supposed to be doing activism, telling you what kind of leash to use on a dog, right, when you're walking them. So, and there's so many other like small nuanced things that are more care based, that, as vegans, we feel like, this is what we're supposed to be fighting for. And so when there wasn't a clear vision of what we're fighting for, there's no clear objective, right? It creates confusion. And that confusion is what I feel like right now is the problem in the movement, right? We need unity on direction, we need unity on the objective. And so really understanding what the objective is and the definition and what we're fighting for has just with instantly, like, reshaped my activism, made me so much more effective, helped me re-go into the things that I learned from these activists online to understand, like, okay, there's an abolitionist message and there's a welfarist message. I wasn't a welfarist, right? I was always an abolitionist, but I didn't realize that the language I was using, the way I was being an advocate, was welfarist, right? And I think that's true for almost every vegan out there on social media or wherever they are. They are true abolitionists at heart, but they just don't realize that the language they're using doesn't reflect that perfectly, right? And so now this is the challenge that we see moving forward, to get people to understand this. And some people get it right away, and for others it takes more explaining or practice for them to really to get it. So yeah, learning about Leslie Cross and what he wrote as the foundation and the goal and everything just completely changed the game for me, and now it reflects in my activism too.
Yeah, thanks
Definitely.
for sharing all that. And I can vouch for that too as well with my activist journey. Like when I started out, I was kind of seeing the trailblazers and how they were doing it, and they were doing a great job, but of course, like not perfect. Some of their language was, obviously can be improved. And I was just kind of doing what they were doing, like you said. But over exposure to, some of your work as well as other activists, I've learned to really appreciate the importance of the language we use when it comes to achieving animal liberation and getting people to really understand the core of the issue. It's super important that we're using accurate terms, accurate words,
Mhm.
avoiding, singling out factory farming, singling out suffering as like the only thing that matters. So yeah, like Austin brought up with the Leslie Cross definition, that really brings everything back to roots.
Yeah.
And if you could comment for us, Ben, on what exactly the definition is that Leslie Cross kind of
Yeah.
coined out.
Yeah, in the simplest terms, it's that humans shouldn't be using animals, right? So the way that he defined it was the doctrine that humans should live without exploiting animals, right? So in there, he defines exploitation as using for selfish purposes. In his documentation as well, he essentially states that because animals cannot give informed consent, all types of use are considered exploitation, right? And so part of, being an activist is explaining the message as simple as possible, right? And if you're using this definition as just, hey, humans shouldn't be using animals, right? It's crystal clear. People will know what you're saying. And as activists, like, there's nothing more powerful than that. You can't misunderstand that to be certain, treatment, that we need to be treating them humanely or we need to be using them humanely. Like it's not there, right? So that's the definition that I like to use and I have been using. And just to highlight the power of this definition, I have this conversation saved in one of my DMs, and it just reflects, like, I had this guy message me this like massive, like, copy paste Joe Rogan kind of like carnivore playbook stuff, right? And I was like, I don't really want to answer you because this is straight copy and paste from Joe Rogan. And he's like, what do you mean, blah, blah, blah? Like, like I'm actually interested in knowing what you want to answer, what your answer is to these questions. And all I said was like, before I answer anything, can we just agree on one thing? The definition of veganism is that humans shouldn't be using animals. And he's like, oh, that's the definition of veganism? And then it all made sense to him. He knew why his arguments were completely irrelevant. And like we didn't even need to have a conversation further, you know? And so like humans are smart. Even like non-vegans are smart. Like they're only going to respond to the excuses and arguments that we come up with as well, right? So it's because we're advocating in the way that we are that all of their excuses exist in the first place. Because if you actually analyze them, they are valid excuses to the things that we are defending veganism as, right? If we paint veganism properly, use this definition, there's there's no loophole, there's no way they can come at it like genuinely. And if they are intelligent, they'll understand that instantly, and we don't have to go into like these crazy long conversations. So
Yeah, well said. It looks like when you have these conversations with people, much of what people say, if not the majority, are strawmanning our position. So
yeah.
when we get to the core of the issue against exploitation, we take, say, 15, 20 seconds to actually educate people before we have this dialogue. we can save so much time where we would be retroactively going back, addressing every single
Yeah,
fallacious argument point by point, whereas we can just sort of set the stage, say, hey, here's our stance, give them some education on it, and everything, in my opinion, just becomes fully aligned in their
yeah,
eyes, and go from there.
exactly. And it's so much easier, right? Like, you know, the conversations are going to be shorter. Your mental health is going to be still intact. You know, you'll feel comfortable at the end, and they'll understand veganism at the end, right? So even if they don't go vegan at that point, me as a vegan activist, part of it, part of the activism is getting people to understand what veganism is, right? And because it's been so heavily like hijacked and distorted, and people have been misinformed on what it is, right? Even most vegans are misinformed. So it's our role as much as activists to educate vegans as it is to educate non-vegans. So yeah,
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that, and I can't agree anymore.
yeah,
It's really important for us to, set the goalposts clearly and definitively that veganism is this. It's not this zero reduction, harm movement, welfarist movement.
yeah,
We have to think about all these extraneous factors. It's just that humans shouldn't exploit animals. And then what do we
yeah,
look at society? Where are animals being exploited? Where can we step in and oppose that? Not participate in that. And it's a lot simpler. So
yeah,
I really appreciate you sharing that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it leads me into a topic relevant to our last episode, which is around using AI to help us as activists. And we mentioned how you created a Chat GPT version where it helps activists, deal with typical arguments that we see. So can you go into how you developed that AI and just talk to us about that?
Yeah. Yeah, that came to be very interestingly because one day is I posted a video on Instagram, and I was talking about some of the great minds like Einstein and Tesla and how they were all vegan, and I went to bed and I woke up and there was like 100 comments from like non-vegans, just like all these different things, and I was like I like how it is when you're first getting into like social media activism and comment activism, right? Like it can be like really like, you know, emotional, and it can really like get the blood flowing, and so I used to get a little bit of stress or anxiety just like having to like respond to all these, but I would get really heated and passionate, right? It wasn't really like stress. So I would want to like put so much energy in, and then it was probably too much energy I was putting into these conversations with people, and they were probably just trolls and unreachable anyways, right? So I was like, how the heck am I going to answer 100 people's comments? So like I was like thinking, okay, copy paste. And I'm like, that's just going to be like not really like that as effective because they're all similar, but it'll be clear that I'm also just copy and pasting. So I went and took like one comment, and I told ChatGPT to create a couple of alternatives to this response, and then I was able to like at least make them look a little bit differently. And then I was like, wait, what if I can do something more interesting here with ChatGPT? And then I what I ended up doing is I just created a transcript of the video and pasted it into just like a regular chat. And I'm like, hey, I posted a video. This is the transcript to my chat. I'm gonna paste some of the comments. Can you help me answer them? Right? And then so I'd get a comment, I'd paste it, and then the answers that it was giving me were just awful. Like pulling from the internet. So it was getting all the the welfarist arguments and whatever. So then I ended up spending some time like writing the tone for the way I wanted the GPT to answer, and then by the end, like I had all these instructions already, just and it wasn't a custom GPT. I was just like in GPT chat. So I was from there like using all of these, and then I was like I created like a prompt that I would just use for a whole bunch of different videos, and then I would also use it for like per comment. So like I would keep it in the thread. So when that person commented again, I would go back to that thread and it would continue the conversation. And I was like, okay, this is like now I have way too many conversations and I can't keep track of them, and now like I'm having to copy and paste this big like transcript and instructions and everything. And so I started exploring custom GPTs and found out that I could just put all these instructions directly into there, and all the research I did and studying I did, and like um, studying the tone and the principles and how I want it to respond, right? I didn't have to like recopy and paste it, and my mental health, like, just that was probably the best thing ever for my mental health, because now when I get comments, I don't really necessarily need to read it. Like, sometimes I'll read a comment, and if I actually genuinely want to respond to them, I will. But for most, like, I already know that I programmed my response here. So what's the point of like me like spending the effort to type that out, right? So just quick copy paste their argument and paste the reply, right? And then with some people, I realized like the first one I built was uncompromising and kind of maybe really direct, and with some people they're maybe more open, so like they aren't as defensive, so I didn't want to maybe you know be as the aggressive with them. So I started just creating more GPTs with different tones, and so I have about 10 GPTs out there. They're all in the store somewhere, and so people can use them. But some will talk like an activist, some will talk more like a wise sage, or different tones depending on what you like. And all of them will be using the same language, the abolitionist language, just different tones. Eventually the goal is to build one that is receptive to tone, so if somebody does seem more open-minded, then it will kind of shift. And so I'm building the framework for that. And yeah, that's kind of the story of how it came to life. And I mean, I'm happy that happened and it led me down that road. So
That's awesome,
yeah.
and I have to say, your AI has been a huge inspiration to me because I would say I'm probably one of the most prolific comment activists that I know, but I've spent way, way too much time, like hours per day for years now, like in the comment section, arguing with people, educating people, outreaching people.
Yeah.
So you've saved me so many hours of my day with your work. I have to say thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. And you actually inspired me with your AI to give it a go. And just as an experiment, I tried out on my own and refine it too. So maybe
Yeah.
we can share some knowledge on
Yeah,
that
I'd
and
love to.
see how we
Yeah.
can collaborate. Because I think we need to get as many vegan activists on this as possible because there's
Yeah.
so much utility within it.
Yeah.
And that actually brings me to my next question is how do you see AI transforming vegan activism and what potential does it have in shifting public discourse?
I think it's I mean, it's not like necessary, but it is such an amazing and powerful tool that if you're not using it, like, the question becomes why, right? For me, like, I've learned so much, um just talking to the GPT that I built, right? Um and so, you know, if I need to learn what's the best way to say this, or like, what would be like a parallel to draw for this example? Like, how can I tie this to like a human injustice or a different injustice that's happened and so like that has given me so many different ideas of how to, better communicate, how to be more effective, you know, and it's like when we're talking about actual like creating change, and actually like being on social media, right? How efficient it makes us is just insane, right? Like, something that I want to work on next, which I've been exploring, is creating APIs to different social media platforms. Like, whenever I get a message, it'll automatically paste that message into Chat GPT and generate a response, right? Because then we can all just make like so many accounts to go out there and just like comment, like just kind of flood the internet with these comments, right? Because like for me also, like, I have a lot of people message me, like, they're not necessarily commenting, they're not necessarily liking the post, but they're watching the videos and they want to go to the comment section to see what people are saying, right? And that's where they really get the value, right? When they see somebody like, oh yeah, that's you know, genuinely have that concern too, and then they open it and they see the response, right? If you're like an intelligent person, you're clearly gonna know that this is, you know, this is truth, right? And so if there's never a comment that gets missed, if we can answer every single comment, just like you never know which one is gonna like trigger that one person, right? And if AI is out there doing it on its own, right? Like us as activists, one, we can enjoy our lives a little bit more. You know, we don't have to add that stress to ourselves. Um, and or it gives us more time to be on the street or with our friends to do activism, or you know, like being creative and coming up with new ways. Like I don't think anybody out there enjoys being in comment sections and, you know, generating responses for the same nonsense over and over. So um I think like for our mental health, for the efficiency, for so many aspects, like, you know, this is powerful. And you know, like a lot of activists will even tell me like, oh, but it's bad for the environment and blah blah, right? And like it may be valid. I think there's a lot of nuances there that maybe don't even make it true, but at the end of the day, like the best thing that I will will ask that person is like, okay, let's say you're being oppressed and somebody can either use a Google search to try and find information to like save you, and it might take like hours and hours, or you know, that, and that might also take more environmental resources, or they can just go to Chat GPT, get the answer instantly, and then you know, use that to help free you, right? They could do it way faster, way more efficiently. Like, wouldn't you want your freedom faster? Like, no matter what? Like, what good is an environment if there's no, like, if you don't even have the ability to enjoy it, right? Which is the case for so many, you know, oppressed individuals, right? This has to be our focus, you know. So the minor, like, you know, increase in environmental cost, even if it is an increased cost, in my opinion, it like it's out of the equation, because this is justice we're speaking about. And if this is a clear thing that helps us get to that point, then it's a cost that's worth paying, because I'm willing to pay that cost. If it was my family members, I would pay that cost if it's anybody of my friends or even strangers I don't know, animal or human. So yeah, I think it's crucial, and people need to start harnessing this power. I think if everybody creates their own GPTs, adds their own voice, you know, adds their own tones and the way that they want to advocate, and just use that as your voice on social media, as the comment section or whatever it is, and really just increase your efficiency in the activism.
Absolutely, and that person who criticized you for the energy consumption of the GPTs, I think that's a good opportunity to remind them of the definition of veganism. You know, let's not get into
Exactly.
these utilitarian arguments about energy consumption, especially
Exactly.
when we're talking about saving lives. You know, we're talking about ending exploitation, I should say, more specifically.
Yeah.
One thing that you
Yeah,
said that,
one thing
yeah,
one thing I want to butt in quick is that, like we talked about in our last episode, our opponents are using AI to make animal exploitation more efficient, more
Yeah.
profitable. So we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage by not using this groundbreaking technology that's evolving every month to be better, more efficient. So like, you
Yeah.
know, like you said, Austin, like you said, Ben, just because like it might use more water to cool down the data centers, that's not I think a valid justification to not be taking advantage of this technology, because our opponents are using it as we
Yeah.
speak. So
Yeah.
yeah.
excellent
Exactly.
point.
Exactly.
One thing that I really love about it is the consistency. Like I put long hours in replying people, honing my arguments. But let's say you have someone who's very confrontational, a huge sophist. They're just gonna continue to try to, throw you these loops. One thing I really love about it is that it stays true to the prompt, to the coding. I know I was having one argument with someone and they spend, let's say 10, 15 minutes typing out a response of every single excuse possible, thrown together. I put it into my GPT. 15 seconds later, I respond. I
Yeah.
had some lady reach out to me saying, hey, I've never seen someone have such a calm and articulate discussion on this before. You really kept your cool there when this guy was talking all that nonsense. I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, that's some great utility. And
yeah.
Yeah,
I've gotten those same messages and it's awesome. And
yeah,
sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe I'll wait a couple minutes before pasting it so they think I like, spent some actual time. But yeah, now I'm just at the point where I'll just paste it. Like I don't,
yeah. That's an
just go.
important benefit for sure, Austin, because
Yeah,
like when we're engaging with this stuff, our emotions can get wrapped up. We can get a little irrational because we're always dealing with the same BS over and over. But the GPT can stay, the same. It's always just objective. It's always staying to its code. So that's a really good point that you
yeah,
brought up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to segue into the next question. So we sort of kind of touched on it, but what do you think are like the biggest hindrances to the success of veganism, the success of animal liberation?
Oh, the biggest hindrance, I think, has to look at us as activists. And if we have ego in our activism, then it's going to be a problem, right? So, if we as vegans are going to make it, are going to make veganism about our own agenda, are going to make it about us, are going to hijack it to be some movement that it's not, this is the biggest problem, I don't know how many people have argued like that are antinatalist or whatever else these, everyone is trying to tell me, well, if you're vegan, you're antinatalist. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like that's not like, you can be antinatalist if you want. That's a complete separate topic than veganism, right? It's a defeatist attitude solution to the problem, right? And it doesn't really fix the problem. You just are giving up on the human race and you're, saying like, okay, let's just wipe us all out, right? But then like what if there's like some afterlife and we're all going to suffer in the afterlife because of that? So are we really even like removing suffering in that conclusion? Like I don't know, So people like that are hijacking the vegan movement to like whatever spread their, you know, their movement, and they can, they can easily capture vegans to be part of this anti-natalist movement because people don't really know what veganism is. So we have to like get rid of one, the ego. We have to get rid of this like, misconception of what veganism is, and all these people need to stop making veganism about something it's not. It's not about human rights. It's not about anything related with humans or the environment or health or anything. It's literally just about freeing animals from us. That's it. So I think that's the biggest hindrance in my opinion. There's probably so much more I can go into, but I think that's the one that I'm just noticing the most right now that needs to stop.
yeah, powerfully said. One thing to really reflect on, if we look at any academic sources on the number of vegans, we see numbers floating around like 1%. My personal perspective is it's much lower than that because if you look at the majority of people who identify as vegan, they're most likely plant-based dieters, they don't really know the definition. You have people who take these surveys and they, misrepresent themselves. So our numbers right now are so small relative to the greatest injustice of all time, by scale, by number of victims. It's just, mind-boggling that how large of this problem is relative to the small numbers that we possess. And this is something I've seen too since I started vegan activism is people hijacking the movement. I think that people come from many different backgrounds and they see us as a very empathetic, very thoughtful group, and they think that we're the perfect canvas to push all of their other ideas on, to get us sidetracked with every single possible thing because they know that we're empathetic people, we're thoughtful people, we care, we want to make the world better, so we're like the perfect people to latch all of these ideas onto. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
it doesn't do anything for the animals. We need to really amplify our efficacy. We really need to get to the core of the issue. So I'm really glad you
Yeah.
spoke on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And looking at the same issue in a more positive light, or just your thoughts on this. How do you envision a vegan world coming to fruition?
This is a great question. In my opinion, Um, there's a couple parts to it. It's one, everyone needs to focus on their part. So I focus on my part, and as everyone should. And that's going to be the most important thing, is we can only bring about a vegan world if we all play our part, right? There's so many vegans out there who call themselves vegan, like we're already saying, who do absolutely nothing. So like if you recognize this problem, if you recognize this injustice, how are you not doing anything about it? Like, I this is a genuine question. Like, I don't know how you can say that you're this empathetic and you have all these qualities and you care so much and not do something, right? So this is the personal part of it. And the second part of it is, are we going to be attacking the root of the problem or the symptoms, right? So from my opinion, from my perspective, the only way we can bring about a vegan world is if everyone recognizes the urgency and tackles the root, right? And Henry David Thoreau has a quote on this. I can look it up, but he essentially says that there's so many things out there, so many things, so many problems, but there's nobody attacking the root, and everyone is only attacking the symptoms. Like, why are we just attacking factory farming? I saw a big influencer again today saying one day factory farming will end, and I'm like, okay, well, what about regular farming or other things? And it's like, why? Like, yeah, it's easy for me to get, like, every non-vegan also doesn't like factory farming, so what am I really catering to by making that post, right? So, like, if you're not attacking the root, what are you doing? Like, you're not really getting people to change their mind, their behaviors, their mindset, their psychology, or anything, right? So recognizing that this is where the problem is, it lies, some people will say in the mind. I will always say it's in the heart. I think that evolution comes with us using our heart to think rather than our mind to think. And so, everybody has. Can you guys hear me? My alarm
Yeah,
went off.
yeah, I think we're good. We
Um,
could edit this. Yeah.
yeah, I'll start off with, again, back to, so I think, a lot of people say that, we have to open our minds, or change our minds. I think that we have to open our hearts, and I think that's where we get to the solution, right? I think a lot of people have used their mind to logically think up the solution, and it doesn't really work. Like, we can look at lots of influencers or whoever, and they get into these intellectual debates, and then they end up like not vegan anymore, right? So I think this is a heart problem, and I think we truly evolve by opening our heart, by being more respectful, by being more caring, by being more compassionate, right? And veganism is the foundation for that. So I think, like, the other step to this, if there would be one more, is activists, for you to look for the people who are open. There are so many people who are just literally waiting for that message, to hear the right message of abolition, liberation, and will go vegan on the spot. So you can waste your time with the trolls, or you can go find those people. And once we find those people, they become, vegan. They're also fighting with us, right? And that's how we need to grow right now, and we need to grow fast, and that's who we should be targeting, and that's how we bring about, from my view, a vegan world.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And I really agree with all those points. We should definitely be attacking the roots as well.
Yeah,
And, we made a podcast a few episodes ago talking about single issue activism. And I can sort of understand why people do that. But like you said, I personally think it's super important to be attacking the roots.
yeah,
And and if we don't attack the root of the problem, then we're always attacking symptoms. We're always like chasing ghosts. And it's
sure.
almost like a revolving door of new ways animals are exploited when we're not challenging the actual roots of the issue.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, a weed problem and you just keep cutting it, right, and it keeps growing back, like, you're just going to be dealing with that your whole life, right? You're not actually making any progress. So, remove it at the root, and then you solve the problem. It's simple.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, people who exploit animals, who view animals as property, as objects for them, are always thinking of new ways to do it, new ways to use them to make money
Yeah,
or to benefit their lives in some way. So when we attack each thing, each cause, each issue one by one, or we look at it from this welfare perspective, anti-suffering perspective, it's like removing the heads off a hydra or something, but never actually solving this true problem. That's another great thing you said, that every person who we get to go vegan to fully understand can become an activist himself, and that's so true too, because it creates like this even more than a domino effect, this exponential growth. With every person we change, they can cause exponential growth, and we can solve the problem in a very rapid time frame, by taking this approach to the issue.
Yeah.
With that said, here's a just light question here. And what's your favorite form of activism personally?
I mean, this is an interesting question because, do I want to be fighting for justice? No, not really, right? So for me though, like my favorite form of activism is education. Um, I've always been an educator. I've always loved teaching. I have a way of like being able to explain things so that people understand them. And I have more focus on educating vegan activists rather than non-vegans. So for me, that's my favorite. That's just I think where I can have the most success and where I can flourish. And throughout the summer, like we did like you know hundreds of hours on the street doing street activism, but I made sure to spend lots of time with activists, training them or teaching them or guiding and giving them advice, because I could spend my time with one person who may or may not go vegan, but somebody who's already active, if I can make them more effective, that could, you know, increase the amount of vegans way quicker, right? So they're already there, they're ready to learn and they want to, be more effective. So personally, that's my favorite thing is working with activists and really making them raise their game and become the best activists they can be.
Yeah, and you do some amazing work. I've perused
Thank
your
you.
Instagram, and I've taken
Yeah.
inspiration from some of the things you've said, and have changed like some of the ways I speak about the subject. And I really appreciate that. And I think within this movement, activists, there's roles for different people who have different strengths.
Yeah.
So when people focus on maybe street outreach, or they focus on education, or they really have nutrition down, they're really able to help people sustainably consume a plant-based diet long term, which of course is important. There's all these different roles we can play, and I think
Yeah.
education and making sure the vegan soldiers, so to speak, are in line and they're doing a good job is important. And
Yeah.
that requires us to not have our egos in the way, being able to look in the mirror and contemplate if our actions are effective, ways we can improve. So yeah, I really appreciate your work and what you're doing to keep the soldiers in line. And
Yeah.
well, that may not be like the right phrase, but you know what I'm saying. Just keep the army working efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate that because, I put lots of effort into what I'm doing and it's draining in itself, So knowing that people are, really resonating with the message and it's really like teaching and leveling up other activists, that means the most and it motivates me to keep on doing this and seeing that there's a ROI to it is just a bonus. So yeah. Yeah.
All right, and that leads us to the last question. Aside from activism, what are your other passions and hobbies?
Oh, I like this question. Um, Helps show that we're just normal people. I mean, um, I love hockey. I grew up playing hockey from Canada. I'm wearing my team over here on my hat. I love watching hockey. I collect hockey cards. My work is also in the blockchain space, and we're building revolutionary technologies to help advance humans, help, find our own autonomy and freedom. I do lots of work in that aspect for free because I just this is what I'm passionate about. So I also have interests in things like astrology. I've been learning esoteric astrology, which is a whole different perspective than traditional astrology, learning how it ties in with quantum physics and like the deeper understandings of our reality. exploring these metaphysical concepts is very interesting to me. Um, and I like the beach and the mountains and just sitting in nature. And I have a companion dog, and she's my best friend, and enjoy spending time with her wherever we may go together. And um, traveling. I enjoy traveling. Right now, mostly traveling for work and activism, so it's not really the traveling I want to be doing, but I'm finding lots of purpose in it. And yeah, I'm just an individual trying to do what I can, and I'm very driven by purpose. And I also like to enjoy the finer things in life, and just human like everyone else.
It reminds me of a post that I just saw, a moment ago that you posted, where you were saying that we're so much more complex as individuals than vegans. And this is a problem too. In general society, people like to quickly make sense of other people. They like to take one thing about us and sort of put us in a box and say, okay, this is this person, and they sort of overlook, the big picture. But at the end of the day, we're all people. We have complex interests, ideas, passions, hobbies,
Yeah,
and we can connect, in a lot of ways too, that just transcend this one thing. And really, we're just all against this injustice to animals at the end of the
yeah,
day.
yeah. It's it's interesting you say that, because we were talking about what percentage of people is actually human or actually vegan. Sorry, that's an interesting way to say it.
Yeah.
What percentage of people is actually vegan, right? I would love to know the number of people who have posted on social media saying veganism is unhealthy. Because, one, I think it's more people than the amount of vegans exist, and like 80% of the population is unhealthy, and 80% of the population isn't vegan, and those people aren't talking about that problem. So why are they so hyper focused on this narrow, like individual group of vegans, and why they might be unhealthy, which we're like statistically not, and rather just ignore the whole population and how unhealthy they are for all of the different reasons. And it just shows how targeted we are with all of this nonsense. So yeah.
Yeah, there's deep like psychological ways that can be dissected, and that would be great to have someone with background in that to discuss those types of questions, because I totally agree. It's insane how much we're singled out, but it's definitely a symptom, I think, of their dissonance.
Yeah,
It allows them to deflect and attack a specific group because it allows them to not necessarily reflect on their behaviors, their morality, and I think that's a part of it. But yeah, it's really important to show people that vegans are normal people. We've got normal hobbies, normal interests, and we're just trying to make a better world for animals.
yeah,
We're not, doing anything wild.
yeah,
It's just as simple as that. So,
yeah,
yeah, you're doing amazing work, Ben. Where can people find you?
yeah. I'm my handle on all social media is just Ben Mazaya, Mazaya. um I made a YouTube recently, and I just started a TikTok account or a Twitter account. And you just post there, a TikTok account, and you just start posting there. But mostly on Instagram, that's where I have the biggest platform. So I put lots of effort in, and other ones will be growing shortly. So, and I've been following you guys too for some time now, and I love the content that you guys are creating and what you guys are doing, and this podcast. And I, look forward to seeing who else you're gonna bring, and listening to the future topics, and maybe coming back here and having another conversation with you guys.
Awesome, man. It's been an honor. And, you're someone I look up to as an activist. Your content has just been so inspirational and impactful to me and many others. So, everyone watching this who's made it this far, give Ben a follow, look at his content, learn from him. He will really open your eyes on how to increase your efficacy as as an activist. Ben, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Hope
Thank you
everyone.
guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Cheers.
peace.